Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You guys sent in some really interesting research on methanol poisoning management.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a closer look at this 2024 review article from the Romanian Journal of Pharmacy and Practice.
Okay.
And it's all about how researchers are looking at how to treat methanol poisoning. Um, but they're trying to kind of blend traditional treatments with new AI technology. And specifically, we're going to be focusing on the work of Arvind Kumar Chaudhary Sudhindra Pratap A. and Ritesh Kumar Rai.
It's really fascinating stuff. I mean, methanol poisoning is a serious issue, and it's great to see how these researchers are looking at all the angles.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So before we get into all the details, can you give us a little refresher on why methanol poisoning is so dangerous?
Yeah, so methanol itself isn't really the main problem. It's what our bodies do with it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we metabolize it into formaldehyde and chloric acid, and those are the real troublemakers.
I see.
Exactly. They can cause all sorts of problems, metabolic acidosis, visual impairment, and even respiratory failure in severe cases.
It sounds like a pretty scary situation.
It can be if it's not caught and treated quickly.
So how do you actually treat it? I know Shatari Prahap and Rai talk about some traditional treatment methods.
Yeah, they do. And for a long time, the mainstays have been ethanol, fomepizole, and hemodialysis. Each one has its own role in managing the poisoning.
Okay, well, let's start with ethanol because I've always found it kind of counterintuitive that you'd use alcohol to treat alcohol poisoning.
Yeah, it sounds a little strange, but ethanol actually acts as what's called a competitive inhibitor.
Okay.
It blocks the enzyme that converts methanol into those toxic substances, formaldehyde and formic acid. So basically, if ethanol is taking up all the space, the methanol can't get in and do its damage.
Ah, that makes sense. So it's kind of like fighting fire with fire.
In a way, yeah. But it's definitely a balancing act because ethanol itself has its own side effects.
Right, so it's not a simple solution.
No, not at all. Chowdhury Pratap and Rai actually stress that dosing is super important, whether it's given orally or intravenously.
And they even go into the specifics of how to achieve the right blood concentration.
Yeah, they provide very specific guidelines based on years of research and clinical experience.
Okay, so it's definitely not something to be taken lightly.
Definitely not. Now, fomepizole, on the other hand, is like a more targeted version of ethanol.
Oh, how so?
Well, it also blocks that same enzyme, but it's more potent and it binds more strongly to the enzyme, meaning it's even better at stopping methanol from causing harm.
And I'm guessing fewer side effects.
You got it. Fomepizole is generally safer and easier to manage, which is a huge advantage in an emergency situation.
And if things get really bad, there's always hemodialysis, right?
Exactly. Hemodialysis is like the ultimate emergency measure. It acts like a filter removing the methanol and its toxic byproducts directly from the blood.
It's a lifesaver in those really critical cases.
Absolutely. Now, the really interesting part is how Chaudhary Pratap and Rai incorporate AI into all of this.
Yeah, that's what I was really interested in getting into. AI seems to be popping up everywhere these days, even in healthcare.
It is. And what's fascinating here is how they see AI being used at every stage of managing methanol poisoning, from the initial diagnosis to predicting how severe it's going to be, and even tailoring treatment plans for each patient.
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It kind of is, but they present some really compelling evidence for how AI could revolutionize this area of medicine.
Okay, so they actually believe we could be catching poisoning before the really serious symptoms even show up.
That's the idea. They talk about AI models that can analyze patient data in real time, looking for subtle patterns and risk factors that might not be obvious to a human doctor.
So it's like having a second set of eyes, but these eyes are powered by algorithms.
Precisely. And not just for initial detection. These algorithms can also analyze things like medical history lab results and other factors to predict how severe the poisoning might become.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. It's all about helping doctors make the best decisions possible, whether that's determining the right dosage of ethanol, figuring out if fomepizole is necessary, or even deciding when to start hemodialysis.
So AI could potentially help make sure each patient gets the most effective treatment as quickly as possible.
Exactly. And they have some really interesting case studies in their research that demonstrate this.
Oh, yeah. What are some of the examples they highlight?
Well, there's one case in particular that involved a 38-year-old male who was admitted to the hospital with classic symptoms of methanol poisoning. Things like visual disturbances, nausea, and, that really acidic blood pH that you see with methanol poisoning.
Yeah, metabolic acidosis.
Oh, right, exactly. So it was pretty serious. And the doctors, they used an AI model to analyze all of his data, and it recommended a combination of IV ethanol and hemodialysis.
Wow.
Yeah, and the patient's condition improved really quickly and without any lasting consequences. So Chaudhary Pratap and Rai, they point to this case and others like it as evidence for just how much potential AI has to improve outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to think that an algorithm could actually be a key factor in saving someone's life.
It is, but of course AI isn't a perfect solution. The researchers are very upfront about that. There are still challenges to overcome, like the need for more data to train these AI models.
Oh, why is that so important?
Well, AI models, they learn by analyzing huge data sets, and the more data they have to work with, the better they become at recognizing patterns and making accurate predictions. So if an AI model is only exposed to a limited range of cases, it might miss some important variations, especially with something as complex as methanol poisoning.
So it's kind of like, if you're only shown a few pieces of a puzzle, you might not be able to see the whole picture.
Exactly. It's about having enough information to make informed decisions.
That makes sense. So what else did Chaudhary Pratap and Rai bring up as a challenge?
Well, another big one is trust. Clinicians need to be confident in the recommendations that the AI is giving, and patients need to feel comfortable with the idea of AI being involved in their care.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a new frontier, and building that trust takes time.
Absolutely. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Now, thankfully, Chanari Prathap and Rai actually included some really interesting figures and flowcharts in their research that kind of show how AI could be used in methanol poisoning management.
Oh, cool. I like visuals.
Me too.
Yeah.
And they're really helpful in this case because they make everything a lot clearer. So, for example, one figure outlines an AI model that was specifically designed to detect and treat methanol poisoning.
Okay.
And it shows how all sorts of data like symptoms, medical history lab results, all of that gets fed into the AI system.
Right?
And then the AI analyzes all that data and figures out the likelihood of poisoning, how severe it might be, and then recommends a treatment plan. It's like having a personalized raid map for each patient.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
It is. And what's even cooler is that the AI model can keep track of the patient's progress and actually adjust the treatment as needed.
So it's constantly learning and adapting.
Exactly. It's not just a one-time assessment.
Hmm.
And another figure delves into even more detail, showcasing a variety of AI models that could be used to really fine-tune things like dosing and decision-making. And they even talk about how AI could enhance the monitoring of patients with methanol poisoning. It really shows that they see AI as this multifaceted tool that can revolutionize how we approach this.
Yeah, it's not just one specific application. It's like a whole toolbox.
Exactly. Now, did they actually mention any specific types of AI models that they're using or developing?
Yeah, they did actually. They talked about using artificial neural networks, or ANNs.
Oh, those are fascinating.
They are, right? I mean, they're essentially modeled after the human brain.
Yeah, they're designed to learn and adapt in a similar way to our own brains. So they're really good at recognizing those complex patterns and making predictions, even when they don't have all the information, which makes them a great fit for medical applications.
Right, because in medicine, you don't always have all the answers right away.
Exactly. You often have to make decisions based on incomplete data. So ANNs are definitely promising.
Okay, so ANNs are one type of AI model that they're looking at. Were there any others?
Yeah, they also mentioned something called support vector machines, or SVMs.
Okay, I've heard of those. What do they do?
Well, SVMs are really good at classifying data, so they can be used to figure out what kind of poisoning someone has or to predict how well a patient might respond to a particular treatment.
So each type of AI model brings its own unique strengths to the table.
Exactly. It's really exciting to think about how all of these different models could work together to, create this really powerful approach to fighting methanol poisoning.
But in all this talk about AI, it's easy to forget about the human element. What do Shafari Pratap and Rai say about the role of doctors in all of this?
Well, they're very clear that AI should be seen as a tool to help doctors, not replace them.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, they envision a scenario where AI handles the heavy lifting, things like data analysis and pattern recognition, which frees up doctors to focus on what they do best.
Okay, so things like communicating with patients, making those tough judgment calls, and providing compassionate care.
Exactly. It's all about collaboration, not replacement.
Yeah, a partnership between AI and human expertise.
That's the idea. But of course, there will be a learning curve for both sides.
Right.
Doctors will need training on how to interpret what the AI is telling them and how to incorporate those recommendations into their decision making. And patients will need to understand how AI is being used and how it affects their care.
It's about transparency and building trust.
Exactly. And I think it's safe to say that AI is going to be a big part of how we manage methanol poisoning in the future. It's not just a technological advancement, it's a fundamental shift in how we approach healthcare.
Agreed. But let's go back to those case studies. They were really interesting. What other examples did Chaudhary, Pratap, and Rai include in their research?
Oh, they had some great ones. There's one about a 52-year-old woman who was admitted with methanol poisoning.
Okay, and what role did AI play in her case?
Well, the doctors used an AI-driven approach to personalize her treatment. Yeah, so the AI model was actually able to analyze her individual response to the initial treatment, and then it recommended adjustments to the dosage of oral ethanol she was receiving.
So it's not just about diagnosing the poisoning, but also about fine-tuning the treatment in real time.
Exactly. And the results were really impressive. Thanks to the AI's continuous monitoring and adjustments, the woman made a full recovery without any complications.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really highlights how AI can make treatment more precise and effective.
It's a really powerful example.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that AI is still a relatively new tool in the medical field,
Yeah,
and there's still a lot we don't know about its long-term impact.
absolutely. And Chaudhary Pratap and Rai, they definitely acknowledge that. They're very clear about the need for ongoing research and evaluation.
So they're not claiming that AI is some kind of magical cure-all.
Right. But they are strong advocates for its responsible exploration and development. They see the potential and they're pushing for us to learn more.
Makes sense. So we've talked a lot about the potential of AI, but I think it's worth taking a step back and talking about the risks as well.
Oh, absolutely. Every new technology has its own set of challenges and potential downsides. What did Chaudhary, Pratap, and Rai have to say about that?
Well, one of the things they talked about was the potential for bias in AI algorithms.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is, and it makes sense when you think about it, because AI algorithms are trained on these massive data sets, right? And if those data sets aren't representative of the population they're supposed to serve, then the algorithms can actually end up perpetuating existing biases.
So, for example, if an AI model is trained mostly on data from male patients, it might not be as accurate when it comes to diagnosing or treating female patients.
Yeah, or if a model is mostly trained on data from patients of a certain race or ethnicity, it might not be as effective for patients from other backgrounds.
Exactly. And these biases can have real consequences, leading to misdiagnoses, inappropriate treatments, and worse outcomes for certain groups of people.
So it's really important to make sure that AI is developed and used in a way that's fair and inclusive for everyone.
Absolutely. And Chaudhary, Pratap, and Rai are very clear about that. They really stress the need to consider these ethical implications.
It's not just about the technology, it's about how we use it and who benefits from it.
Exactly. And another potential risk is over-reliance on AI.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a danger that clinicians could become too dependent on the AI's recommendations and might start to overlook important clinical clues or not use their own judgment as much.
Right, so it's about finding that balance between using AI as a tool and still maintaining human oversight.
Exactly. It's about a partnership, not letting the AI take over completely.
Yeah.
And another issue is data privacy.
Oh, right, because AI models need access to tons of patient data in order to learn and make predictions.
Exactly. And that raises concerns about whether sensitive medical information could be misused or compromised.
So we need to make sure that there are strong safeguards in place to protect patient privacy.
Absolutely. And Chaudhary, Pratap, and Ray, they really emphasize that in their research.
It's a lot to think about. It's like a balancing act between harnessing the power of AI and making sure that we're not sacrificing patient privacy in the process.
It is, and these are just a few of the ethical challenges that we need to be aware of as AI becomes more and more a part of healthcare.
It's definitely a complex landscape and one that we need to navigate carefully.
Agreed. Now, we've talked a lot about AI, but we shouldn't forget about the simple things we can do to prevent methanol poisoning in the first place.
Yeah, prevention is always the best medicine. What are some practical tips that our listeners can take away?
Well, the first thing is to be aware of where methanol is found.
Yeah.
It's in things like solvents, antifreeze, some fuels.
So it's not something you'd usually find in your pantry.
Exactly. And that's why accidental ingestion is a real concern. People might mistake it for ethanol, especially if it's not labeled clearly.
Right, it can definitely happen.
Yeah, so knowing where methanol comes from is the first step in protecting yourself and others.
So what can we do to minimize the risk of accidentally ingesting it?
The most important thing is to store these products safely out of reach of children and in containers that are clearly labeled.
And make sure those labels are easy to read and in a language that everyone in the house can understand.
Exactly. And never, ever transfer these products into unlabeled containers like old soda bottles or anything like that.
That's asking for trouble.
It is. And if you're ever unsure about what's in a container, just don't take any chances. Call your local poison control center. They can help.
They're a great resource.
They are. Now, another thing to remember is that methanol can actually be absorbed through your skin.
Really? So it's not just about what we drink, but what we touch too.
Exactly. If you're working with any products that contain methanol, always wear protective gloves and clothing.
And make sure you're working in a well-ventilated area so you're not inhaling the fumes.
That's a good point. Inhalation is another route of exposure.
So gloves, protective clothing, good ventilation, all essential when handling these products.
Absolutely. And finally, it's important to know the symptoms of methanol poisoning. If you or someone you know experiences things like headache, nausea, vomiting, confusion, or vision problems after being exposed to methanol, get medical help right away.
Don't wait.
No time is of the essence. Early recognition and treatment can really make a difference.
Okay, so to recap, prevention is key when it comes to methanol poisoning.
Know the sources store products, safely use protective gear. Be aware of the symptoms and seek medical attention immediately if you suspect poisoning.
Those are great takeaways. All right, well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about methanol poisoning. We've talked about how dangerous it can be. We've gone over the traditional treatments, and we've explored this whole new world of AI and how it could revolutionize care.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting deep dive. And it's clear that this is just the beginning of the AI revolution in healthcare.
Yeah, there's so much more to learn and discover, and I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Me too. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to the present. We've talked about all the good things about AI, but what about the risks?
Yeah, that's an important question. What did Chaudhary Pratap and Rai have to say about the potential downsides of using AI to manage methanol poisoning?
Yeah, they bring up some really good points. I think what really stood out to me was how they kept emphasizing the human element. They're clearly excited about the potential of AI,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also really aware of the potential pitfalls and ethical considerations.
Right. It's not just about the technology itself. It's about how we use it and who benefits.
Exactly. And one of the things they talk about is, what happens when an AI model recommends a treatment,
Okay.
but the doctor disagrees?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Whose judgment takes precedence in those situations?
That's where having clear guidelines and protocols will be super important, and it really highlights the need for doctors to be trained in how to interpret AI recommendations and not just blindly follow them.
Right. It's like you can have the most advanced tool in the world,
Yeah.
but if you don't know how to use it properly,
It's not going to do you much good.
it's not going to be effective. And Chaudhary Pratap and Rai also talk about how AI could potentially change the doctor-patient relationship.
We do, and in a way that I think could be really positive.
Oh, how so?
Well, they suggest that if AI takes over some of the more routine tasks like data analysis and initial diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
it could free up doctors to spend more time actually talking to their patients.
Oh, so instead of being buried in charts and screens all the time,
Right.
they can actually focus on building that rapport and addressing the patient's concerns.
Exactly. It could lead to a more empathetic and patient-centered approach to healthcare.
That would be amazing.
It would. But of course, there are some concerns too.
Like what?
Well, some people worry that relying too much on AI could make healthcare feel impersonal and dehumanizing.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the difference between talking to a real person and interacting with a chatbot. Sometimes you really need that human connection.
Absolutely, especially when you're dealing with something as serious as, poisoning or any other medical condition. And that's why Chaudhary Pratap and Rai are so adamant about using AI in a way that enhances the human touch in healthcare.
Right. Not replacing it.
Exactly. And they also bring up a really interesting point about how AI could help democratize access to specialized medical knowledge.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, imagine if AI could help doctors in rural areas or underserved communities diagnose and manage complex cases like methanol poisoning,
Mm-hmm.
even if they don't have a specialist on hand.
Yeah, that could really level the playing field when it comes to healthcare access.
It could, and it's something that Chaudhary Pratap and Rai are really passionate about.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key message you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the future of healthcare is being shaped right now.
Yeah.
And AI is a huge part of that. It's a complex and rapidly evolving landscape.
For sure.
But by staying informed and engaged, we can help ensure that AI is used to create a more equitable, accessible, and compassionate healthcare system for everyone.
Absolutely. Well said. A huge thank you to Arvind Kumar Chaudhary, Sutindra Pratap A., and Ritesh Kumar Rai for their groundbreaking work in this field.
Yeah, their research is truly paving the way for a future where AI and human expertise work together to make a real difference in people's lives.
And to our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of methanol poisoning management and the AI revolution.
We hope you found it informative and engaging.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.
Happy learning!
Bye, everyone.